Welcome to Humanizing Our Differences. I'm Roz Elliott, and this is the third in a four-part series exploring the experiences of newcomers to our community and laying the groundwork for important conversations around diversity and inclusion. We are live streaming on the Staysh Facebook and YouTube. You may also be watching on Channel 1 on Hay Communications or Huron, and we welcome our viewers there. This series is brought to you by Huron County Immigration Partnership and Full Pop Media with the generous support of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. Well, now with me, zooming in, is Rand Lobb. Welcome, Rand.
How's it going, Roz?
Great. And we have Jason Burt. Burt, welcome. You are a vice principal at South Huron Secondary School. Welcome, Burt.
Thank you, Roz.
Great to have you. And back with us is Jana Bayer-Smith. And Jana is GDCI principal here in Goderich. Welcome back, Jana.
Thanks, Roz. It's great to be here.
Well, tonight, our episode, we're going to break it down into four little chunks for you. And we're going to just do a little talk in between them, get your opinions and your perceptions. Tonight is all about privilege. That's what you'll see this one is about. And we have with us a former educator, the Deputy, Director of Education for Avon Maitland, and as well, Leroy Hibbert. And Leroy is from the LUSO organization in London, and he is a very accomplished diversity facilitator and inclusion speaker and coach. So let's get underway. Let's show you the first clip, and then we're going to come right back and get underway with our important conversation. Humanizing Differences, the role of open discussions and discovery of revelation, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable in understanding how racism in its various forms presents itself. I am very happy to be joined by Leroy Hibbert, and Leroy is an educator, facilitator, coach, diviner, just an incredible human being if it can be all wrapped up into one. Leroy, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. As an employee of LUSO Community Services, we do a lot of work. I do a lot of work through them in the area of race and culture and cultural competency in Black history. And it's for schools from both the elementary and also the secondary panel and post-secondary as well. And I do some stuff in the community as far as community organizations and working with agencies to build some capacity so we can move forward in a very unique and a very supportive way.
You mentioned two words that I think are really foundational to our discussion: competency and capacity. And there is competency as we have discussions, and that's where sometimes people feel challenged. They don't feel competent in having a firm understanding of how to have these discussions, and then the capacity to do it. How do we build capacity? So I'm hoping that in our little short time together, you can help with that. Is that a fair ask of you?
Absolutely. That's not a problem whatsoever.
There's this wonderful quotation on your website. I'm going to read it. I just loved it. It said, "My objective is to play a small part in helping and supporting people from all nationalities and background to live a successful, fulfilling, and prosperous life." I get a sense that this is really a life purpose for you as well. What draws you to this work?
Well, my love for people. I really do love people. And I learn a lot from the people that I'm working with. You know, it's interesting as I go and do some facilitation work and, the agency that I work for and the people that I work with and just my years of working in this field, it's just been personally a blessing to me to hear the stories, to listen to the people, to learn and grow as an individual person. And not just make this about me as a profession, but making it about them as a human being. And it's been really, really, really rewarding for me. And it's nice to see for myself is when I go and do work in some of the schools and I see students grow and have their own families, and I get to see them in various places, whether it's the grocery store or the bank or getting gas, and they can remember and recall, my time with them in the classroom or outside of recess. and just to try to support them in various capacities. It's very rewarding for me, and it's just so encouraging.
So there we have Leroy just opening it up, Jana and Bert and Rand. I had just the good fortune of spending so much time with Leroy, and I just feel like I had an instant friend in him, and just, you can tell he is driven, and it's his life purpose to really help everyone be living a successful, fulfilling life. What stood out for you, Rand, as you listened to Leroy open up the conversation?
Well, the love for people is being tested right now in this pandemic, right? So you maybe in a time when you can't have the contact and connections you would normally experience, you would be more open to people you wouldn't normally be around or something like that. Maybe this is a spur for people to be more accepting because of the need that's been exposed, our need to be around others, to be in groups and to be with people. And I wonder if that's something that's going to be boosted by the fact that we've had so much time where we've basically been locked up.
Yeah, thank you for that. And let's go to you, Jana. What did you take away just as a starting thought?
When I listen to Leroy, what I hear is compassion and empathy in his voice and how he approaches people. And I would say that his life's work is also our work, right? The goal to be able to have influence and to be able to see our students grow up and have gained knowledge and felt empowered by us.
That's a great point you make. I mean, your life work is education. Rand, it's been yours. And Bert, you're an educator, you're a vice principal, and you and Jana have actually worked together and worked a lot together on issues and creating supportive communities. What stood out for you, Bert?
So I listened to him, and then while he's talking, I'm hearing Martin Luther King in the background, and I'm hearing about the beloved community. And I'm thinking about now, as we said before, we're looking at a time where people are wanting to come together and not feel alienated. And so the work that we have to do as a beloved community is be more accepting and understanding. With that baseline, we're not trying to create enemies, we're trying to create friendships and friendship groups. So I think in the situation with him, with the love of people, he didn't specify which people, he said people, which meant you love everybody. And to be loving and accepting for everybody, you want to give them a sense of belonging. And I think that's our ultimate goal as human beings.
Oh, thank you for that, Bert. The beloved community, that just really resonated with me. Well, this tees up nicely what we're going to go into next, which is more about the ingredients of a conversation. And again, what we talked about is it's not easy for everyone to have a conversation about inclusion and being part of a beloved community. So take a listen and we'll come back. We all know that good conversations, good discussion leads to greater understanding, but how do we start these conversations? So many of us have difficulty with them. Any ideas of how we could begin?
What's very important, I believe, is being quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. I think it's very important that we not just see the people that are different, but we understand where they're coming from. You know, this word has been floating quite a bit around called tolerance. And that's been somewhat of a catchword that's been going on in various places and communities. And for myself personally, I don't believe we should tolerate people. You know, you tolerate a bad hair day. You may tolerate, maybe if your outfit doesn't match with your shoes or my clothes don't match with you may tolerate those sorts of things, but I don't believe we should tolerate people because they're not inanimate objects. They're individuals that have a will, that have emotions, that have feelings. So I believe we should understand them, understand their story, understand where they're coming from, understand their history, understand where they like to go in their lives. And I believe that's quite important in the process of developing capacity so people can grow, because we're all learning at we're at different levels in our lives.
That's really helpful what you said about tolerating. I mean, in a way, if someone says, I tolerate you, that's not very fulfilling. It doesn't feel very good just to be tolerated. It's not opening yourself up very far. You've been very much a part of the conversation and part of the policies and the systems helping to shape an understanding. What role is there for the white male of privilege?
Well, first of all, it's recognizing that, like when you said earlier, did I take offense from that comment? And I don't, because it's true, right? I would have to come up with some pretty bizarre arguments to say that I'm not a white male of privilege, right? Middle class, growing up in Goderich, Ontario. So I think the first thing is to recognize that it's true. We do have privilege, and that privilege comes with a lens and a bias. So I grew up in a middle class home, both my parents from Huron County, and we learn a lot from our parents. We learn a lot from our families that we grow up in, and they grew up in, my dad grew up in the 30s and 40s. So that's a different world than we have now. But that impacted me, and I'm sure I have some blind spots when it comes to racial sensitivity because of my lived experience. But I think it's important to call yourself out on that, to understand I have blind spots, and no matter how old I am, I should try to learn from those all of the time and listen to people who have different experiences than I do.
Why do you think it is that so many people find themselves intimidated to have questions about differences?
Personally, the organization that I work for, like I presently mentioned, Luso Community Services, I've been there for a number of years doing this work, and the agency has been just phenomenal as providing me an opportunity to do this work in the way that works with who I am as an individual person. And it's important, I believe, to this conversation, I think, why people don't talk about racism possibly, or anti-racism education, for possibly fearing of saying the wrong thing or being accused of something that they are not. So in essence, maybe I should not say anything so I won't get in trouble on either side. And this is a difficulty people have, because when you talk about racism, it's a very controversial topic, and it can really go sideways very quickly. My personality, in a sense, is that I try to understand where people are coming from, because we all have different stories. But understanding those stories and really trying to build a consensus as to having people really take some time to reflect and to understand why we feel this way. Why, for example, we are maybe quote unquote protesting. I believe Dr. Martin Luther King said something, paraphrasing something very similar, as far as, riots are the voice of the unheard in essence, because people feel that they're not heard correctly or heard at all. They may feel that they have to go to this particular extreme to let people know, number one, we are here, and this topic is very critical and important to us, so it does need to be addressed.
Yeah, that I can understand that. That says a lot, actually. And so the safe bet for some people is don't say anything because I don't want to step in it. I don't want to make a mistake. So what if I make a mistake? Are you okay if I make a mistake, but I'm trying?
Absolutely. It's interesting because I don't have a concern or a problem with people being ignorant, but it is concerning to me if they stay that way. Maya Angelou said something very interesting. I believe she said this: do what you know, and then when you know better, you do better. So if people do make a mistake, I know we have this sort of cancel culture, which is quite evident right now, but I want to be responsible in a sense that I do believe people should be held accountable for things. But at the same time, I believe that people should have a bit of grace as well, so that we can walk together through this, because it's very contentious right now. The world is very, very polarizing. It's either you're on this side or you're on this side. And on occasion, sometimes people are forcing you to choose. So it's this kind of very interesting walk we have to contend with throughout our daily lives, but understanding is very critical.
So it's this constant just being open to, well, things have evolved, and people are claiming names and that give them power back, or finally get to claim power for the first time.
Right.
And we just have to be adaptive. Is that fair? That's what learning is.
Our language has evolved for lots of reasons, and we're, as I said, we're just more socially aware. And every now and then we'll end up in a conversation with somebody who goes, "Why is that offensive now?" Mm-hmm. And it's almost like an exasperation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Why is that offensive? Mm-hmm. And I go-to line on those, and I go, it's not for me to say. I don't know necessarily all of the reasons why everything is offensive, or why we have to learn and change our language, but I'm not part of that group. So I don't get to judge that. That's not fair for me to say, oh, we should be able to say that, or we should be able to call people this or this or this. It's not fair. I think people who have been marginalized, and we're talking specifically about different races, I think they are the voice that we need to listen to. It's not white privileged male doesn't get to tell a group of people who come from a more diverse setting or a different setting than I do. I think I need to listen to them and learn from them.
Well, welcome back, team. A lot to unpack there. That was a pretty meaty conversation with both our friends. Well, team, let's go to Bert first. Bert, what resonates for you?
So two things come to my mind, which is thinking and it's swirling around. There are two parts. One is racism. Because of the polarization, racism is seen as if you are a racist, you burn crosses in people's front yards and you call them the N-word to their faces. If you don't burn crosses and call people the N-word to their faces, you're not a racist. But the binary system that's put together is not true. White supremacy exists for those who are white fragility, those who feel white guilt, and those who don't want to move because they don't want to say the wrong thing to be perceived as racist. So I'd rather maintain white solidarity and remain silent. And if I see something wrong, I may say something behind closed doors, but not confront it and call someone out or call someone in. The second tier is a lot of equity work pauses because of the thought of being uncomfortable. When thinking about uncomfortable, it's not the right term. There's discomfort and there's being uncomfortable. It should have a little bit of discomfort to talk about the privilege that you had, that you didn't earn, that you have, and you haven't used it to better someone else. So discomfort. My shoes hurt. I take them off. I get a bigger pair of shoes. Now my feet feel fine. I recognize the discomfort. I've made adjustments. I've learned and made changes. Uncomfortable. My shoes hurt. I am going to lace them up tighter, and they're still going to hurt, but I don't want to change shoes because I'm afraid that if I change shoes, I might actually find that the shoes that I were in were so wrong that now I'm in a better pair of shoes. But I'm not going to chance that. So therefore, I'm going to stay with these shoes that now give me bunions and break my toes because I'm going to stay silent.
Wow. That's a great observation. Jana, you get to work with Bert. Is it like this all the time? Do you get such great conversation? Wow. What respond or add on? Add on to that.
Yeah, well, I would happily. So that's why I wanted Bert here, because this was, like, when you think about this section that we just listened to, all I could think about is working alongside Bert. And one of the things that Leroy says is around ignorance, right? Like, I don't mind ignorance, but it's concerning if you stay that way, and that it's essential to have grace when you're dealing with people. And as I watched it, I thought about how, I wasn't born recognizing my privilege. That's something that I learned, and I learned through the grace of others like Bert and others long before Bert, who can call me out, who can help me see things that maybe I couldn't see clearly, and who I'm glad to be able to be an ally with, that it's really essential to be able to listen and to learn. I love how Leroy says, be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to get angry, because that's how we can recognize our bias, and that's how we can recognize what maybe is making me feel uncomfortable and unpack it. And Bert and I am proud to walk alongside him as an ally, and together we both read Me and White Supremacy. And through that, I recognize there's a lot of things in Me and White Supremacy I could say that I do well as a white woman in power. But and Bert mentions it, I as a quiet introvert often would err on the side of silence, and I don't do that anymore, because that's not being an ally, and that's not changing those shoes so that they're more comfortable.
Thank you for that. And, I'm actually tonight going to chat with a very dear friend from Colorado, Uche, and Uche is just accepted a role as leader of diversity and inclusion at our firm or company. And one of the things Uche said to me was just like that, Jenny. He said, please never let one get by you. Please never let a comment make people accountable. Just don't be silent. You can't be silent. And that just always stuck with me. And so thank you for raising that. Rand, let's turn to Rand. Rand, what do you think?
Well, I know Ted. I've known him for a long time, and he said something that hit me. I mean, it's other people's place to tell us when they see something in us that we need to know. So I maybe don't know that I have privilege at a certain point in my life. And when someone tells me that I do, if they're telling me that, I have to listen and I have to think what that means. And I have to realize that not knowing I have it probably means I have it, right? Not understanding what my position is all the time is privilege. There are people who have it placed upon them by the circumstances around them or by other people around them, what their position is, or they're given some context under which they must, live, work, feel, be. And to not have that is to have the privilege. So you have to listen to other people. You have to have someone tell you, because if you have it, you're just like a fish in the water. You don't know you're in the water. You're just there doing whatever you're doing. So it can be hard for someone who's had a certain system for a long time to realize, oh, that system's kind of angled for my success. And I need to extend parity to people who aren't feeling these same things. And to know that, maybe it's a little bit of a sting for some.
Yeah, it comes back to that quick to hear and slow to speak and slow to get angry. Again, that circle of friendship that we're growing right here, just the four of us. In a second, we're going to go to our third segment, which is Words Have Meaning. But I want to do a quick call out, if you guys will afford me this. We have several people watching, and people are writing comments in, and I can see who's watching. And one person commented and shared with us, and I'm pleased that she felt that she could share this. She said, I'm a first-generation Canadian, and my home was defaced as a child because of my German heritage. So again, when you see racism and culturalism, in different ways, it stings, right? It stings. Another person saying, great conversation tonight, and also from a newcomer view, and also from an immigration view. So we'll get into that a little bit more too. So in a second, I'm going to have Nick tee up for us the next segment, which is really, again, about words have meaning. So words have meaning, guys. Take a look, and we'll come back and unpack it. I was taught a long time ago that the word compassion, if you really look at its meaning, means to walk alongside me so we can best understand each other and empathize. I'm wondering right now if I can walk alongside you and you can walk alongside me, and you can help increase some of my understanding and others' understandings about certain things that I may not fully get. There's a lot of language out there, Leroy, where people, again, shy away because they don't understand it, and it gets put out there. And actually, some of it is from people, they're called woke warriors. It's white people who are out in front, and they shut others down, and they feel defensive. So can I run some of these terms by you, and maybe you can demystify them a little bit for me?
With racism specifically, a lot of it is, I believe it's about power and control. Power plus prejudice equals racism. And sometimes people don't understand that the power that they have and the access to resources is called, racial capital or cultural capital, where people do have access to resources that many people take for granted, because that's the way I was born into this system. I was born into the way the society is. When I was born, I saw a doctor that looked like me. When I go get my hair done, I can get a hairdresser that looks like me. When I go down to school, I can get educated from books that are written by people that look like me. So when you're not in that particular environment, you feel very isolated. And that's a privilege that people may have that they may not recognize. And what happens when they recognize it doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just gives people an opportunity to understand that, okay, this is what I have. I may have power, but I can use that. Power in and of itself is not bad, but it's just about how you can use that to help benefit someone else in a different situation.
And you've worked a lot across Ontario on committees as well, helping with unconscious bias and also more systemic issues. Talk a little bit about that.
Right, I helped on a project a couple years ago, working with directors of education on the project was called bias-free decision making. So we delved into this whole notion of implicit versus explicit bias, and tried to have a conversation as a group of educators in Ontario about, do we really understand what's driving our decisions, and are there some things from our lived experiences that we aren't even aware of that are systemic, implicit as opposed to explicit? Like we don't realize them. And like many sectors in Ontario, we are dominated by white people. I would have said white male years ago, but that's rapidly becoming not the case in senior positions in Ontario, which is a great thing. But certainly a disproportionate number of people as directors of education, superintendents of education are white. And the other thing that I learned being in public education for so long is that we can learn so much from our young people. I mentioned to you earlier, Roz, that I firmly believe that every generation is better than the previous generations in so many ways. And one of them is in social awareness.
You know, it's no disgrace to be Black, but it's often very inconvenient. That's by James Weldon Johnson. But it's being a person of color / racialized person, we have to walk through the world a little bit differently. Not to say that everybody else outside of our persuasion is bad, but we just have to be a little bit more aware because of the fact that society, for some very interesting reason, is not necessarily conducive to who we are as individual people, because our community is very diverse and we understand that, but sometimes that diversity is not reflected into the services that we want or the educational information that we need to help us to grow as individual people.
I just called you out as a white man of privilege. How does that sit?
Well, it's accurate. I think that it would be pretty naive to think that I'm not. You know, grew up in Goderich, small town Ontario, middle class family, white male, like many, many people in Huron County. So my experience relative to other people of color and other cultures is quite different.
Yeah, so you're fine if we
I'm
call you out. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this is in many ways an unlikely conversation. We've been doing this series on racism and creating more welcoming communities for rural settings. So people might say, really, you're chatting with an older white guy? Isn't that just kind of go against the grain? But I'll share something with you, Ted. I had this great conversation with Dr. Nita Mosby-Tyler earlier in the series, and she clarified that your voice, my voice, has a place too, and diversity includes us. So we welcome your voice and we welcome your lens as an educator and your lived experience as a white man.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's a great point. We all have a lens, we have a perspective, and I've been lucky enough to be able to, travel outside of Huron County for different parts of my job, and you learn very quickly that living in Huron County most of my life, we are privileged in many ways, but we're also secluded from lots of different cultures, religions, racial diversity, et cetera.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I mean, awareness has been one of our big topics, and awareness comes when you meet others, you have a healthy curiosity, and many of us don't leave in many cases or have many experiences. You left, got your education, and then came back to be a young teacher in the area.
Right. So I went to Western for my education, and I was willing to work anywhere in Ontario, and luckily my first interview was for the high school in Wingham. I started my career back in Huron County and ended up coming back to GDCI as a teacher and vice principal and principal. But yeah, being away at least a little bit, you are exposed to the rare upbringing you have in Huron County, and you learn a little bit from that. And I also think when you work in public education, you have a very different view of the world when you compare it to other experiences. I grew up, my family were educators, my mom, my siblings, and when you work in public education, I think you understand that it has to be about everyone, and if there are children falling through the cracks for whatever reason, if they don't see themselves in the education, they don't see themselves in the adults in the room, then they're at a disadvantage. And what can you do as an educator to assist them? I think that's been part of my view of how public education plays into this for a long time.
Would you say that from your early beginnings as a teacher educator to later on as a leader in the system, your view and lens has evolved?
Oh, for sure. It wasn't something that I thought a lot of. You can think of teaching in Wingham, Ontario, or Goderich, Ontario in the 1980s and 90s. The level of diversity would be very, very, very small. So it wasn't something that you encountered day to day. But as you learn and you grow and people move in and out and you see that one family, and then you start wondering, how does that family feel about living in Goderich?
And it's not to say that people that are not from our community don't have a hard life. I mean, what happens is because it's that topic as well, privilege is very polarizing as well. And, you know, people can look at that and say, well, Leroy, I don't have any privilege. My mom and dad came here and they didn't know how to speak the language and they had to work very hard. And, you know, they got themselves together and we moved into a home. We got access to some resources. And that's great. I understand that. So we do have that in commonality. But the difference is that possibly your skin color was not used as a deterrent to get to that particular place.
Here's a phrase I've heard, and I wonder if you can make it real for me. Unconscious bias. Is it possible that I'm showing unconscious bias when I'm interacting with someone of the Black community?
That can happen on occasion. I mean, many people can have unconscious biases, whether you're from the Black community or not. You know, unconscious bias is something that you're not readily aware of. It's like, for example, growing up in a household, and you may see your mom and dad in a household, your parents, whoever may be in your household, and they may be doing things as a child that you yourself think that you don't agree with. You know, and you say, well, I'm not going to do that. And it's interesting, as you get older, and as you decide to step out and move out on your own, and you do certain things, you almost say, I sound like my father, or I sound like my dad. I act like that sounds like my mom. And it's not something that was conscious for you. It just, you picked it up because you were around the environment. It got on you. So it's something that just kind of happens through what's called associations and also thought processes and different things of that nature.
But how about with fellow educators? Have you had people come into Huron County, to our area, start working for us, or a person of color, and how was their experience?
Yeah, a very unique opportunity. And this is probably 20 years ago. I was principal at GDCI and I was hiring, actually I needed several English teachers, it just so happened. And so I interviewed a bunch of people and some really wonderful, wonderful people were interviewed, and I was able to hire 3 at the same time. And one of them was a woman. She was born in London, Ontario, but her family is Jamaican by descent. So she was Black and she moved to Goderich with her daughter. And wonderful teacher, great experience for me and for her students. She was able to introduce Black history into one of the classes that she was teaching, and I would say that the kids loved her.
People talk a lot about equality versus equity. Is there a difference, and how does that show up?
That's quite interesting. Equality and equity, they can be used synonymously as far as terms. But I think in life, we have this idea about treating people the way we want to be treated has been a very strong golden rule. But I believe in essence, maybe to add or to tagline to that, is treating people the way you want to be treated is possibly good. But I think treating people the way they want to be treated, maybe even a little bit better.
Another one, people use this word, and I want to make sure people are clear about it, microaggression. So something I think it means I don't realize I'm doing what I'm doing, but it doesn't feel good.
Yes, microaggressions are actually, it was coined by a man named Chester Pierce in the early 70s. Chester Pierce was a psychiatrist, I believe, and also a professor at Harvard University. And he coined the phrase because he noticed that people of color, racialized people, were there are comments that were being made towards the community that were kind of backhanded comments that the intent was not necessarily to harm or hurt, possibly, but the impact is very, very different. So when somebody says something, the way it lands, we look at that more importantly than how it was perceived. And so with microaggressions, they could be something very similar, like simple, like asking a person maybe from a different country, a different community, where you're from. So for example, they tell you where they're from, but then you ask them again, no, where are you really from? So it's this idea that people of color, possibly in different communities, have to continue to justify themselves as not being aliens. We've been here just as long as everybody else. But you don't necessarily see that in the workings of different environments, right? So microaggressions happen throughout, my life. I was actually just recently, when I say recently, I could be talking about 10, 15 years ago. But recently I was actually at a school and I was asked to come to, I actually went down to talk to the principal about some programming. So I went into the school, I saw the principal, I shook the principal's hand, and I said, hi, my name is so-and-so. I work at such and such organization. I believe this is maybe prior to Luso. But anyway, went in there, and long story short, after I was done talking to him, the principal looked at me and he said, you know what? You speak really good English. Where are you from? And then he asked me if I played basketball. So I paused momentarily and I just said, okay, how am I going to handle this? Because when you're from these communities, you always have to ask yourself, you don't want to be stereotypical in your response, the angry black man or the angry black woman, or you're just overreacting. It's not about that. And why are you so temperamental and you people? And so I just paused and I said to myself, English is a universal language. It's not necessarily, if you're taught it, you know how to speak it. Then he proceeded to take me into his office and he gave me a stack of basketball application forms because I think there was a tournament happening in the city and he wanted me to promote it. So I just kind of looked at that as a teaching opportunity, just so that I can leave him with a positive way of maybe possibly looking at a person the next time that he comes in contact with somebody that looks like me. So.
I sense that great amount of grace that you have to help other people get it. And that's a lot on your shoulders. Oh, I'm glad I have you three with me. That was a lot of good stuff. Before we chat, I want to call out some comments that have been scrolling through. I just want to share them. One that is probably kudos to the three of you as educators. I've been impressed with how Avon-Maitland School Board has welcomed newcomers and embraced unique experience. And a person below said, totally agree. Well, let's go to you, Bert, first. Bert, what do you take away? What do you want to zero in from that? And we can do a couple rounds here.
Okay, so I'll just talk about one thing right now. And what comes to my mind is the unconscious mind philosophy. Whatever is hidden that you don't expose, it actually makes all the decisions for you. So a concrete example will be, I lose my keys. I lose my keys because I put them down somewhere and I forget where I put them. The reason why, because I don't put them where they're supposed to be. So I haven't trained my mind to hang them in a specific spot. So I'll lay them down anywhere. So now I'm having to search for my keys. My unconscious mind kicked in because the hidden value of putting them where they belong has not gotten into my psyche. Once it's in my psyche, then it's automatic. I don't have to think about it. So when it comes to systemic racism and prejudice and biases, if I didn't know that touching a black male female's hair was very wrong and racist, people want to focus on the intent. And when you focus on the intent, I didn't intend to harm you. Now I'm trying to make you feel bad for me that why would you even mention to me that it was disrespectful, instead of focusing on the impact and how I am not at a zoo and I'm not a petting animal. So that's the issue that we have to bridge in order to control our unconscious mind with our conscious mind.
Yeah. That was a great example too. That's a great example. Jana, do you want to pick on something else or go down the same path?
Well, go into a bit different. It's interesting because I watched this earlier today, and like I said, it brought to mind my work alongside Bert. But when I was listening to this again, I actually found myself being a little emotional. And I'll tell you, it's because when I work alongside Bert, I am become more and more conscious of the microaggressions that he experiences. And Bert, I hope you don't mind me sharing a story, but our sons live in the same community, and they were biking together. And Bert mentioned to me that we were talking about helmets, and our boys are at an age where they don't want to wear a helmet, and how it was really important that he teach his son follow the rules, because his son is a black boy in a white community. And as aware as I think I am, I don't have to think about my son when he hops on a bike. And when I listen to this, and I'm totally emotional right now, but when I listen to that and I can hear that, and I sadly was witness to it when I worked with Bert as well. And we would share things where it was, I often had to question how people deal with me because I'm a woman, and so we have conversations about that. But he often, and I often, alongside of him, had to question why people were responding to him or dealing with him the way he was. And I can't imagine having to always have that in your head, right? We don't have to think about those things all the time. And I want to be more woke, right? I want to be able to see those things, and I want to be able to call them out. So yeah, it was just Leroy's powerful, right? And then you hear when you really start to reflect, you really start to see white privilege, and you really start to see microaggressions. I think it should hurt, like it does and hurts, because those are our kids, and that's my friend, and that's my son's friend. And we have to work harder.
We have to work harder. And thank you for saying that, Jenna. I go back to something that really hit me from Leroy, which is it's no disgrace to be black, but it's awfully inconvenient. And just that extra filter that you and Bert, you and Leroy described, that you have to think about how you're going to respond. And Jenna, you're right. Like we're not doing that, and that's privilege. That's privilege. Rand, what stood out for you? Oh, Rand, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I coughed off air, so I hit mute. What hit me is the line that Leroy said, that it is inconvenient to be black. And I feel the sting of that reminding me of the summer watching the protests. And I got on a path where I was going back to James Baldwin, which, of course, an old white guy would do that, right, in the summer. And forgive me for being stereotypical in that regard, but I had to go find the quote because I remember reading The Fire Next Time. And there's this line that he said that was horrific. You were born into a society which spelled out with brutal clarity and in as many ways as possible that you were a worthless human being. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. And that is so gross. And aside from looking at myself and my privilege, what it would make me feel is you can't even be angry, and you're in trouble for being angry about that limit. You know what I mean? Like you don't get to, if you protest and you're white, this is also from a Dick Cavett interview. I think James Baldwin said this: if you protest and you're white, you're a hero. If you protest and you're black, you're a criminal. Like, how is it fair that the setup is the punishment? You know what I mean? It's brutal. And that just hit me when Leroy said that. I just remembered all that at once. And I had my own anger, like you, Jen, and I can't imagine if I was a black man of a certain age with a black son of a certain age, how much rage I'd have to hide. But I'm white. I'm allowed to have all the rage I want. I can say whatever I want. And I have this bubble around me, and that really hit me. That bothered me.
Yeah, and you know, we're going to talk in a little bit about allyism in the last little bit, but if we can go around the horn one more time, I'm wondering, too, Bert, you've lived in the States. You're from the States originally. Is there a comparator there? Is it different? Is it the same? What stands out for me that way? Rural, urban, Canada versus U.S.
Well, I look at it that if you look at the population of 30 million and compare it to the population of 330 million, you'll come to roughly the same amount of racism on both sides of the border. You don't have to go across the United States border to see racism. It exists in our schools. When I have students of color having to give white students the N-word pass so that they will be their friends, otherwise they won't have a friend, you don't have to go that far. When you have students creating Snapchat conversations and the title of it is N-words be tripping, you don't have to go that far. When you have a teacher who's struggling because students are saying that they should be able to say the N-word, that it's not that big of a deal, you don't have to travel that far. So equity work needs to be done on both sides of the border. I think the sad part on the Canadian side is when you only have 30 million people and the percentage that you have, yes, it's a lower number, but you only have 30 million people. So when you look at it that way, it's the same across the border. It's just, you can space it out more because there's more land in Canada than there is in the US. It's just spaced out more. I think from what I've noticed in the 3 schools I've worked in, I've experienced racism in each school I've worked in and then had a conversation. It exists in every school on the board. So you don't have to travel that far.
You don't have to travel that far. And rural versus urban, do you find, you know, again, you know, you live in Huron County, you live in a rural county, you know, people travel less, they don't leave, they're not exposed to different people and different cultures and different nationalities and just diversity. Do you see that in rural Ontario?
So it's almost how I compare the Republicans and Democrats. In rural Ontario, racism is in your face. In urban Ontario, it's more hidden and more microaggressions. I get the questions of, did you play basketball when you went to college, university? And I'm only 5'11", and I can coach it, I can't play it. I do get followed in stores. I do have to keep my hands out of my pockets when I leave jewelry stores. I normally have to, it's almost like I can't remember the kid's name that out of Brantford, and he talked about his experiences. I lived those microaggressions. I've had people cross the street on me when I was walking down Richmond in downtown London. I've had people clutch purses in the elevator. I've experienced it. So I think it is more, I pat myself on the back because I'm not burning crosses like the rural people do, but you're just as bad because you're silent and you live in white guilt and white fragility, and you really don't want to change or self-reflect for the fear of finding the true nature and then feeling powerless of how to fix it. When you do have power to fix it, but it's that fear factor. So I think it's pretty much spread evenly. It's just how it's expressed.
How expressed? Oh, Jana, you're in the education system. You and Bert together, and Rand, you were. With our youth, are we evolving?
Yes, but there's still a lot of work to be done. We've been talking about this, some of us in education lately, and I believe that students definitely have come a long way, but I believe that there's still a lot of ignorance, and that it lies with us to be able to teach them and to challenge those behaviors that we see and experience sometimes on a daily basis in our schools. So yes, kids are learning, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Lot to go.
What I would have seen, Roz, is that kids have an unrealistic vision of blackness. That is what they actually see as green. They might see Jay-Z or some famous black celebrity who has a platform and a position of, an enormous amount of respect compared perhaps to the communities that are spread across the country, or just being a regular person with a job trying to get along, especially in America. And they see those Black figures as being representative of Blackness. And so, look, they're bulletproof because they're green. Mm-hmm. And that idea, I think, filters through maybe some of what Bert was saying, that kids want to be able to speak like Black celebrities that they recognize because they think it's cool, or Black culture has always been so informative to white culture. We've always, Pat Booned the Little Richards and tried to take on certain aspects of Black culture and make it our own and say, look, I'm hip, or whatever, put in the language of choice. But they don't understand Jay-Z is green, you know what I mean? Or pick the celebrity now. Bert, correct me if I'm wrong. Is this something that's real?
Oh, it's very real, because you look at LeBron James, you look at Steph Curry, you look at, you mentioned Jay-Z, I look at Barack Obama. These guys are green, absolutely right. The sad part is, with racism and prejudice, there are people who may be downtrodden will still say, yes, he's this, yes, he's that, yes, he's the president, but at least I'm not Black. And it's that piece that's put on that makes it more difficult. And I mean, I hate to admit it, I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes. I have all these issues because literally I have to think 7 times faster for what comes out of my mouth, because I am being judged on what I'm saying. And I have a speech impediment, and I have to think about that. And I'm minor dyslexic, I have to think about that. So you're carrying all this baggage, and then to top it off, okay, now I'm an African-American male in a white society. And when the curriculum was written, and when the Confederation was drawn, and when the Constitution was written and signed, who was in the room? I'm sorry, excuse me, who wasn't in the room? And those who weren't in the room are the marginalized people saying, can we have equality? And the people who signed the document are saying, wait on time. In time, you will have it. And you mentioned Adam Baldwin. It's one of his famous things he said was, and when he turned 60, he said, I'm 60 years old. I won't live another 60 years. How much time do you need? You've had my dad's time, my mom's time, my sister's time, my uncle's time, my niece's time. You had all this time. How much time do you need to act on now? And I think that's where we're stuck. And when it comes to privilege, the best example I can give you is, if I have a scratch on my hand and I go to Shoppers Drug Mart, I get a Band-Aid. What color is that Band-Aid?
Yep.
Bert.
Yep, there it is.
That is profound.
That is profound.
That is profound.
Well, it's I'm going to go back to a word that Janice said. This stings. This absolutely stings, and it hurts. And it hurts when it happens to a friend. And we know that we can't feel what you're feeling, Bert, because we just have no idea. Next, we're going to show a little clip on how to be an ally and see if we could take anything away from this and what that can do for us. So if you're game, I'm going to show that now, and then we'll come back and have one final go around. How's that sound?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. What would you say to me? What can I do better in all this?
Basically, the support of the community is very critical and important. And we talk about this term allyship. I know with certain communities, that word sometimes is not even favorable. They may have different terms, and asking yourself, what is an ally? But for the sake of conversation, we'll use the term ally. In being an ally, I think it's really critical and important that you speak with and up, but you don't speak over the community. And when you go into, it's like building a house. If you're actually going to build a house and you've never built a house before, and you're going to talk to the builder, the first thing you want to do is find out what the builder would like you to do, as opposed to building a house and then the house tumbles and the foundation is not secure. So with our community, it's very important as well to kind of be with us and just find out what you can do, where you can put your hands to support the direction that we're kind of going as a community. And possibly part of that could be reading, could be getting some resources and educating yourself about possible different issues or circumstances. I mean, the media right now, news right now, and just kind of get a grasp. You know, Will Smith was asked a question not too long ago. I'm just paraphrasing the question, but he was asked the question, is racism increasing? Is there more racism than there was previously? And his response was basically, no, it's not increasing. It's just being filmed. So now you get to see what communities have been talking about for generations. It can be daunting, but what I try to do myself and what's helped me is I don't take on I can do what I can because I'm a limited resource. And so with all that's going on right now, I try not to get it in me, even though it's all around me. And part of that is, you know, I've got my beautiful wife, very supportive, a wonderful family. Also, and really maintain my mental health and well-being, whether it's reading a book or even watching a TV show, whatever the case may be, and really trying to look at what I can do to kind of build bridges in communities. You know, it is very weighty, though. I mean, the topic, not to dismiss how people do feel and the weight they feel of, here we go again. It's almost cyclical. But in essence, you know, I kind of just look at it as, you know, as opposed to, here we go again. I just kind of look at it as, okay, what do I do? What's my role in this now to really help and get people around me to kind of, you know, help in these cases as well, not to take everything on my own.
How would you coach people on how to use the word and to label racism? Do we use it too lightly, too heavily? I'm not sure.
That's an excellent question. I believe there's no such thing as reverse racism. Racism is racism. And this idea and philosophy that's out there, you're just trying to use a race card. Like, I don't need a race card. I don't, it's not a MasterCard. I'm not purchasing items. These are experiences of people that are actually living today. So, I mean, it's a tricky thing. It takes time, but I believe that we're not using it overly, because we as a community, and I can talk for the Black community a little bit, not for everybody, but my experience as well. We talk about this all the time. It's not even a question that we don't have to kind of schedule it into our calendar, like a dinner or a meeting. It comes up. I mean, we can be watching a television program and a commercial that's very racially insensitive. Mm-hmm. It comes up. We could be, for example, going to a movie and watch a movie. It could be, I know I'm not into horror movies, but it could be a horror movie. And people from my community may look at that and go, why are always Black people the first to die? We could be watching a commentator on a program make a comment about a particular population of people. And then our own experiences that we come across on a regular basis, we don't even have to make this up. Mm. We can actually, when we talk and we bring something up, it's almost verbatim, where we don't even have to explain ourselves because the other person listening has gone through the same thing.
Let's just say you're in your coffee clutch, at Tim's or somewhere else, just having a great little chat with your buddies, and someone says something that isn't really on spot. How do you address it? How do you do that in a constructive way?
It's really hard to do because most people, their social groups, you try not to get into heavy conversations. You avoid things like politics and religion, right? And you like to have a good time, and that can be a damper when a groups of people are having, just as you said, having a coffee or a beer. But as subtle as you care to be, you have to say something, right? Saying nothing in this day and age is not an option.
In life, I think we should be a thermostat and not a thermometer. And the difference is a thermometer responds to the temperature, but a thermostat sets it. Mm. And we can set the temperature of our life, our communities, and the people that we interact with.
Wow. You just left me with a powerful thought. Thank you very kindly for that gift.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Everyone, we have just had the most engaging conversation with Leroy Hibbert, and thank you for being part of Humanizing Our Differences. This is a series really meant to open our eyes and make us more actionable in our conversations and welcoming newcomers and those who are part of our communities, acknowledging and appreciating difference. And we're back. Wow, that was a meaty way to end. Rand, in a second, I'm going to turn to you. But again, being an ally, again, a lot to take in there. What stood out for you, Rand?
Well, I mean, I was just kind of going in a circle thinking about sort of, Ted used the term lived experience, but Leroy's lived experience and the frustration of that is palpable. And I guess this is such a white privilege, maybe a white privilege thing to say. You tell me if it is, guys. I wish I could somehow, that allyship could take some of the weight off a Black person. You know what I mean? Like in a white community or in any community. Or, you know, I remember that shot of Portland of the mothers. And I don't care if it was propaganda, if it was blown out of proportion, but I remember all these suburban mothers that were sort of at the front of a line of young people. And there was something really trenchant about that hit me. If that was real, if that happened, that's sort of what is a microcosm of what we should all be doing, is that whatever rain is going to fall on Bert or Leroy or anybody else, it should fall on me too. And I should somehow, sorry, I'm out of frame. As an ally, I want to be a person who can get in the same rainstorm and somehow say, you know, either share my umbrella or we're both getting wet or something. I don't know. There's that. It's like actions, not words, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think that's a great, I feel that too, Rand. And again, when Leroy spoke, and I've heard it from Bert, and a good friend earlier in her series, Dr. Anita Mosby-Tyler she said, you know, I'm a 50-something Black woman. I'm tired. I've been doing this for 50-some years. And she's tired, and I could feel it. And I feel it when Leroy speaks. And Bert, I hear that with you. It's like every day I've got to put on my game and filters, and that's exhausting. It's tiring. It affects my blood pressure. And we're not doing that. So how can we be a good ally? Bert, how did Leroy's comments in particular or Ted's come to you?
Well, I look at the work that we need to do, and it's 3 tiers, which would be education, our legal system, and our healthcare system. Let's just stick with education, because that can be for another podcast. I think with education, it's important, like Ted said, who's in the classroom delivering the curriculum, who's being represented. And then I jump into the next thing and look at the curriculum and look at graduation requirements. When your history or when your culture is considered an elective, but colonial culture is a graduation requirement, you're already embedding into your country that generation as they go through the educational system, that Black history should only be February 1st through February 28th. Because heaven forbid we don't want them to ask for White History Month, not realizing that white history, colonial history, is every day. And with allyship, we have to listen more than we want to be a part of the conversation. So this is going to be controversial. So I would use both countries. Canada just celebrated 150 years of being Canada. Beautiful, no problem. The intent was to bring all the people together as one great nation. What was the impact on the First Nations Métis Inuit population that you're celebrating the fact that 150 years ago, the treaties that were signed are not being recognized? And then in my home country, you look at the Declaration of Independence, and on 4th of July, we fire candles off, celebrating the independence of such a great nation. When that document was signed in 1776, I was still a slave. I didn't get freed until 1865, but who are we kidding? when laws were put in place to where I didn't be able to get a chance to vote until 1965, pushing 1970. All this history is in Black history, but because it's not spread out, you're not getting the full historical experience in both countries. So true allyship would be, okay, what are we doing and what is the impact of what we're doing versus the intent? Because intent means, like Leroy said, intent, it means nothing. You can intend, and I don't like when I go to meetings when they say, general rule is always have the understanding that there are good intentions. No. It should be understand the impact of what's coming out of your mouth before you spread your lips and start speaking.
Yeah. I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to do that, right? Bert, that's what we hear a lot. And hey, it stings, it hurts, it sets people apart, it pushes people down, back. I liked what Leroy said about speak with, not up and over. And so much of that I'm sure you endure all the time. Jana, if I can go to you, what resonated for you?
The importance of allyship, the idea, and just listening to Bert even, that if we are an ally, we need to recognize the intent or the impact, and we need to be able then to apologize. So listen, okay, my impact was damaging. Apologize for that, because again, we go back to people can be ignorant. It's concerning if they stay that way. And then as an ally, we have to commit to changing our behaviors. So we're going to make those mistakes, but we have to be able to acknowledge them, and we have to make the commitment to change.
Make the commitment to change. Accountability, as we've heard time and time again. Let's go around the horn one last time with some closing thoughts. And Rand, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Well, my closing thought is it's frustrating. And I guess, again, someone tell me, is it frustration is the response of someone who feels the difference between what has happened for them in their lives and what has happened for someone else in their lives that you didn't feel before. So the frustration is the fact that Leroy or Bert or anyone had a different experience growing up and was limited in that way that James Baldwin said in that, that paragraph. It's crazy making to me. It's frustrating to look at someone who, I think of the Scarlet Letter, that I didn't ask to be a different color from whatever was the dominant culture, the colonial culture. I didn't ask to live the life in this way. I'm just trying to do what I do. And how come we can't start with that? Like we treat people as though they made a decision or something. I don't know how to word it, but it just makes me feel so frustrated that people feel marked by virtue of their nature that was not a choice. And somehow there's a greater culture that's not paying attention to that and thinking about what that means and the weight of it. It just makes me feel crazy. It's insane.
I think I'm walking that journey with you, Rand, just frustrated and
it really is frustrating,
yeah.
Roz.
Yeah.
Frustrating for me, a middle-aged white guy.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm frustrated.
Let's go to Jana. How frustrated are you?
Well, very frustrated. And Leroy talked about, here we go again. And I've had this conversations, like, I remember Rodney King. I remember what happened to Rodney King. And that inspired and that moved people. And yet here we are again, right? Like, the movement for equity has not moved fast enough. And I'm not Bert, but I can imagine it must be frustrating to we keep having these conversations. And I'm really frustrated that we haven't moved farther. I'm really frustrated that we have to think about curriculum of First Nations, Indigenous peoples, our African Canadians as an add-on and not something that's naturally embedded into our school systems. I'm frustrated that we keep landing here, and we can feel that frustration. But we need more people to feel it, and we need more people to act, and the change has to happen. I think I've said that already once today, right? It's I'm tired of spinning our wheels. Equity work has been important to me a little since before I became an educator, but when I became an educator, it became an absolute passion, and I can't believe I'm still talking about the same issues in education or in our system that I was 20 years ago. And that makes me angry and makes me not be silent anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Jana, thank you
Ross,
for
can I
being with us.
interrupt to
Please
ask Bert
do.
a question?
Yes, please.
Jana, you mentioned Rodney King. I wonder, Bert, do you find that when you're teaching or trying to reach kids from this, very Anglo-Saxon rural environment, when I was teaching, I always tried to talk about something like an Emmett Till story. Like the Rodney King is a certain generation, but I would always try and find like a kid at the age of the people I'm dealing with. Do you find that anecdotal histories or those very personal histories have an impact for kids, or do you think it creates a fine point that they can feel and get behind? I'm just curious about that.
Well, it's two things. One, it's more difficult for me because I was a U.S. history teacher by trade and government politics, the legal system. So I can go to a U.S. thing like that. But for Canada, I actually have to I'm doing a lot more reading. So I'm reading the book now called The Skin I'm In by Desmond Cole. I hope I got the right title. It talks about a little girl, they called her Sophia to protect her identity. She was in elementary school and she was hogtied, person of color, of course. She was hogtied by police officers and left on her belly for, I think, 38 seconds. I can't remember top of my brain, but the little girl, elementary kid, I want to say she was 9, but I could be mixing up the other girl that was pepper sprayed in Rochester, New York. That recently happened, but in 2016. So I explained to our youth now that this happened to someone your age because of the color of skin. Why does it amp up when it's a person of color and deemed a threat, but police are trained to de-escalate when it's a person who's not of color because they feel they're not a threat? And for a comparison, I would use, okay, let's look at, and I don't use the I'm not Rodney King. I don't use the Black Lives Matter where there was the burning and the destruction of property. I don't use that as an example. When the Black Lives Matter rally came into Washington, D.C., and nothing was burned down, nothing was torched, there was a heavy military presence. When the people came to have an insurrection, there was police officers only. And they knew they were coming to try to stop the certification. And then recently in Florida, a state that has said you don't have to wear masks, there are now college kids going down for spring break. Majority of them are people of color. They were pepper sprayed and shot at with pepper bullets. The reaction of what happens when you are a person of color makes you think twice. And so the thing that Jana mentioned earlier about my son, I told her, because Jan, they're boys, they'll need to wear helmets. I said, Jan, you understand, my son is Black. I don't need him to have a negative interaction with a police officer looking for something else to ask him on. Because first, he's going to pull him over for not wearing a helmet. Then he's going to try to figure out, is there anything else that I can potentially charge him with? I don't need to have him in that situation in the first place. And Black parents are having to teach that. When I talk with white parents about this, because I had a parent so cute. He said, I get put over cops all the time. And I asked myself, okay, when you get put over a cop, do you ever think you're going to get shot? And he said, no. And the conversation went quiet. And then I could hear the wheels turning in his head, and I was starting to make headway. And he did a little research to find out that saying all lives matter hurts Black people because all lives did not matter because Black lives currently do not matter. And that was a learning thing for him. So yeah, you have to contextualize when you're talking to students to help them understand, and using person of their age or something they can relate to helps bridge that gap.
Yeah, that great question, Rand. Great question to call out. And again, I go back to something Leroy said is we don't have to make this stuff up. that we don't have to go looking for it. It's every day, it's at the movie theater, it's in the newspaper, it's a daily conversation, it's in the classroom. Bert, I'm going to give you a +1 to wrap us up. What's closing thoughts? And I want to thank you for being with us. You are just a thank you. That's all I can say is thank you. What do you want to leave us with?
I'll leave you with this, and this is always my go-to leaving comment. If Black, Indigenous people of color could have ended racism and discrimination, it would have been done a long time ago. Women were not given the right to vote because they protested. Women were given the right to vote because white men said, yes, let's go ahead and give them the right to vote. So we have to think of it that way. We need to stop romanticizing history by saying something to the effect of Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier and became the first African-American Black person to play in the Major League Baseball. History needs to be real and authentic. It should say Jackie Robinson was given the opportunity to play baseball on an all-white team because white owners and white managers let this one person come through so they can get more dollars from the Negroes in the area, and let's put them in the worst seats and still get their money because they're going to come out to see just that one and pay that money. If that is said historically, now we're now cracking the case. Now we're diving in deep, we're peeling off layers, and now we're going to address systemic racism. But as long as we romanticize it, allow people to get away with things, it won't change. And all the equity work that we're doing is not firm on the solid foundation of systemic racism and prejudice. Systemic racism and oppression does exist. Until we can agree to that piece, equity has no chance.
Oh, wow.
I want to take that course.
Yeah, I do too. It just
I do.
proves the point. Who holds the pen holds the story, right? Makes up the story, controls the story, and that's just been reinforced. And I share Jana's thought like it's Groundhog Day. We wake up and we do it all over again. One thing we are going to do all over again is this next Thursday. We're going to have our final segment of Humanizing Our Differences. I couldn't have asked for a better team tonight. Bert, you introduced this notion to me, and I think I'm going to keep it if you'll let me. The beloved community, you're now part of mine, I hope. This circle of friendship that we're starting, and I feel honored tonight to have spent time with all three of you. I want to thank Hay Communications and Huron Tel for making this a priority, and I want to thank Philpott Media. I want to thank, of course, Huron County Immigration Partnership and Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada for sponsoring us. But again, I want to go back to our three stars of the night, Bert, Jana, and Rand. Thank you again. We will be back next week, Thursday, 7 Thursday, final episode, Humanizing Our Differences. As always, hyperlocal for you.
Bert, do you hear me?
Yeah.
That was revelatory. I need you in my life. It hit me like a shot between the eyes.
Thank you.
Jackie Robinson was perfect.
And all that comes from equity work, reading from White Fragility to Me and White Supremacy, the Desmond Cole series. And I've got another book called The Ku Klux Klan in Canada, a century of promoting racism and hate in a peaceful kingdom that I got recently. So